Hi everybody, I'm Ryan. Today we're going to talk about my favorite legacy deck at the moment. Not 4-color, but 5-color Yorion Uro Beans. I don't know if I'm going to call it that in the title of the video, we'll figure it out. But effectively, this is a 5-color control deck. Really, it's 4-color splashing Orcish Bowmaster. 5-color Uro pile. Yorion Uro pile, which has been around for a while. It's meant to be a control deck, but we're just jamming all the most powerful cards in Legacy and card advantage engines in Legacy into this deck to just overwhelm our opponent with value. Now, advantages is if this deck gets its feet underneath it, it is just unbeatable. Disadvantage is because it's a Yorion deck, you're playing a lot of cards, which means that your combo hate often can be few and far between, and you have to mulligan really aggressively against certain. But let's jump into it and see what I have to offer you guys. So this is my 5-color Yorion Uro deck, and it is a super streamlined Uro pile. Sometimes you look at Uro piles and it is not doing great, but I will say another disadvantage of this deck is it being 5-color. A few wastelands can pretty much totally destroy your mana base and take you off 1 color, often black, because you only have 3 actual black sources on our mana base, in Xander's Lounge, Underground Sea, and Bayou. So if you don't draw Life of the Loam, sometimes it can just take us off of color. But I think that the splash is worth it. So let's take you through some of the cards, talk about like the overall strategy of the deck as a whole. So we're playing the Brainstorm Ponder combo. If you're playing blue, you probably should be playing both of these cards, especially if you're playing fetch lands as well. They're some of the 2 best card advantage and card selection engines in the format. There's not a lot of special non-other parts of Legacy tricks with these cards. Of course, there's like Brainstorm tricks of like, you know, brainstorming, putting away cards on the top of your deck that you don't want, and then shuffling things away either with a fetch land or Yorion revealed. You can do the similar thing with Ponder if you only want one of the cards, then fetch your Yorion revealed and like a fetch land, fetch those things away if you want. But, you know, these are just like normal Legacy tricks. And if you're watching this video, I hope that you are relatively familiar with Legacy. Because we're also playing Swords of Plowshares, 1 mana, exile target creature, control gains life equal to its power. We do not care about that life gain. We are not trying to kill our opponent very quickly. Because, again, we are a control deck. It is a super clean removal spell. Our splash for Orcish Bowmasters, 2 mana, 1/1 flash. When Orcish Bowmasters enter the battlefield, and whenever an opponent draws a card except the first one they draw in each of their draw steps, Orcish Bowmaster deals 1 damage to any target, then amass Orcs 1. Effectively, this is a hoser for other Ponder Brainstorm decks, and is just like such a powerful power card. We're playing 4 Up the Beanstalk. This is the big card that kind of streamlined this list and made it like a card advantage list rather than an all-in control deck, mid-rangey deck list. Up the Beanstalk and the One Ring is kind of crowded out Minx and Boo, kind of before the Uro lists were like Uro Minx and Boo lists. But when we play Up the Beanstalk, it is a 2 mana enchantment where when it enters the battlefield and whenever you cast a spell with mana value 5 or greater, you get to draw a card. The cool part of this is we have a bunch of cards that are mana value 5 or greater that we don't actually have to spend 5 mana on. Force of Will we cast for free, triggers Up the Beanstalk. Solitude we can cast for free, triggers Up the Beanstalk. Leyline Binding we can cast for free and it triggers Up the Beanstalk. And even when we hardcast Solitude or hardcast Lorien Revealed or 4th Aeolingas for X's 3 or more, which happens a lot because, again, we're a control deck. We're playing our lands. We're doing our thing. We trigger Up the Beanstalk. It is wonderful. Life of the Loam is really needed. Getting a Wasteland loop with Life of the Loam, we have 1 Wasteland, is pretty good. But also playing against other Wasteland decks and being able to kind of recover our mana base is super powerful and super important as well. Playing, I guess we can talk about Force of Will and Force of Negation together. I think it's possible you're supposed to play 4 Force of Negation just for like extra combo hate. We're playing 4 Force of Will, 3 Force of Negation. Having this interaction with our opponents is really important. And we don't really care that we're exiling a card from our hand because we have so much card advantage in Up the Beanstalk and the One Ring and Uro and Brainstorm and Ponder and all of that stuff. That it's okay if we exile stuff from our hand. Be able to freely cast our cards and set up while we're protecting ourselves from the combo. We're playing 3 Teferi Time Raveler. Teferi Time Raveler is particularly powerful in this list. One, not having our Up the Beanstalk or the One Ring or Uros or Orcish Bowmasters countered is really powerful. You know, only cast spells anytime they can cast a sorcery. There's some combos that require them to cast things at instant speed, so it's a little bit of a protection from that and like Cascade and stuff like that. But its -3 is super duper powerful in this deck because we're not really worried about drawing out our deck like we are with the modern version of this deck. But if we want to like draw some cards, -3 on Up the Beanstalk, return to our hand, draw a card, play Up the Beanstalk, draw a card. If we have the One Ring on kind of a high number, if it's sitting at 3, 4, 5, something like that, and our life total is looking a little precarious, we can return the One Ring through our hand and reset the One Ring, replaying it and giving ourselves protection. Similar things with like Leyline Binding and stuff. There's a lot of play with Teferi Time Raveler we're allowed to have, which is really, really cool. Even Yorion, returning Yorion to our hand or whatever. We're playing 3 Uro. Uro is just a powerhouse of a card. 3 mana 6/6. When it enters the battlefield, sacrifice it unless it escaped. And when it enters the battlefield or attacks, you gain 3 life and draw a card and put a land from your hand onto the battlefield. So for 3 mana, even when you don't escape it, for 3 mana, you can play it. It's gain 3 life, draw a card, ramp a land, which is insane. Just already very good. And then in the mid and late game, we can pay 4 mana, exile 5 other cards from our graveyard, and cast a spell from the graveyard. And that actually happens very, very quickly because we're siphoning through our deck very quickly. We have fetch lands, we have Yorion revealed, we have all these cantrips. All this stuff are entering our graveyard, and we bring Echo and Uro, and now we get to do all those things, and it's a 6/6, and when I attack, I gain 3 life, draw a card, and do it again. So it's just very, 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 very powerful. We're playing for the One Ring. The One Ring, a 4 mana legendary artifact, indestructible. When the One Ring enters the battlefield, if you cast it, you gain protection from everything until your next turn. At the beginning of your upkeep, you lose 1 life for each burden counter on the One Ring, and you can tap it to put a burden counter on the One Ring, then draw a card for each burden counter on the One Ring. This is an insanely good card advantage engine. It protects us with the protection, and even protects us from things like Thoughtseize and Grief effects as well with the protection. And then it's a card advantage engine. You tap it once, draw 1 card that replaces itself the turn it comes out. We untap, we get dealt 1 damage. Then draw 2 cards. So it's drawn us 3 cards and only dealt us 1 damage. And then we get dealt 2 damage. So it's dealt us 3 damage. And then we tap it and draw 3 more cards. So now it's dealt us 3 damage. We've drawn 6 cards. That is amazing. And we got protection the turn it came out. And at that point, with all of the powerful cards in this deck, we're beginning to take over the game. Now, some kind of nuances with the One Ring. Again, the One Ring plays great in multiples. You draw into your deck really, really deeply. Once you have 3 or 4 burden counters on the One Ring, you're going to want to play another One Ring and then select the new one to reset the burden counters effectively. Or again, you can return it with Teferi. Make sure you're gaining life with Uro so you don't actually kill yourself with a One Ring, but it's not going to happen that often with this deck. Playing 4 Solitude. This is another sometimes free removal spell. It's effectively a Swords to Plowshares. We can evoke it by exiling a white card from our hand. We have plenty of white cards in our deck to be able to do that. We have Swords, we have Teferi, we have other Solitudes, we have Leyline Binding, we have 4th Eolingas. But we can also just cast this card to be a finisher and also remove cards from our opponent. We already talked about Force of Will. We're playing 4 Lorien Revealed. Lorien Revealed kind of pseudo acts as a land. We want to make sure we hit all of our colors, so being able to Island Cycle is extremely powerful. But also, just like casting it for 5 mana, especially if we have a Beans or 2 on the battlefield, also very powerful, just being able to get through our deck, get to these other powerful cards. And it fills our graveyard for Uro, and it pitches to Will and Force Negation. Lorien Revealed's just insane. Playing a Leyline Binding, just a 1 mana flash O-Ring that also triggers up the Beanstalk, and we can kind of return to Teferi if we really need to. Very, very powerful. And they're playing 2 4th Eolingas. This is a way to just kind of take over the game. It's red and white and X. Create X 2/2 red human knight creature tokens with trample and haste. And whenever 1 or more creatures you control deals combat damage to 1 or more players this turn, you become the monarch, which means you draw a card on every one of your end steps. And we have plenty of ways to make sure we keep the monarch, especially free ways like Solitude or the One Ring or things like that. Now, if we're looking at the sideboard is pretty straightforward for the stuff it comes in against. Blue Elemental Blast and Hydroblast are for red spells. Surgical Extraction is our graveyard hate. Pyroblast and Red Elemental Blast are for blue decks. Meltdown for artifact hate. Force of Vigor for artifact hate. Carpet of Flowers against decks with a lot of islands, so we can kind of ramp our mana. And Veil of Summer against counter spells. And then Yorion never comes in because this just is a Yorion deck, and that's our companion. So there is my 5-color Yorion Uro Beans deck. I think this is an extremely powerful deck. Again, its weaknesses are its mana base, and like sometimes you just draw the wrong side of the deck to beat a combo in game 1. But if this deck gets its wheels underneath it, it is unbelievably powerful. So if you like this video, please be sure to like and subscribe. Check me out on social medias. Links are above me and in the description. Also check out Patreon. There's a bunch of cool sideboard guides and stuff there. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.